Well, I think because just for sake of time and making sure Daniel has enough time for his presentation, I'm just going to get started. My name is Benjamin Ibarra Sevilla. You all know me, right? I'm a faculty member here, associate professor, and I am also a CAAD fellow this year, and for I think a couple more years. And so this talk, as all of you know, is within the CAAD Forum framework, and that happen usually on Fridays, and and with this format. So we thank all of you for being here. We were just talking with Daniel, and yesterday when I saw only half of my students in my class, I was like, "Oops, it's gonna be interesting tomorrow." But I appreciate that. We really appreciate that you are here. I'm going to introduce Daniel. It is truly a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Daniel Escotto, someone I have had the privilege of knowing for, it's about 30 years. We went to college together. We did School of Architecture together. We share a lot of things. And in that time, I have been consistently amazed by his knowledge, breadth, and depth. Daniel is widely recognized for his work in shaping and reimagining public spaces in Mexico, especially in Mexico City. But his architectural culture extends far beyond urbanism and policy. He is a scholar with a deep appreciation for architectural history, theory, and design. And his ability to connect ideas across disciplines makes him one of the most compelling thinkers I know. Today, Daniel will speak about the origins of Mexican mid-century modern architecture, particularly the work of Max Cheto and the broader influence of European immigrants on Mexican design thinking. This topic is both timely and fundamental to understanding how modern architecture evolved in Latin America, the intersections between European avant-garde movements, local craftsmanship, and the political and cultural climate of Mexico in the mid-20th century shaped a distinctive architectural identity, one that continues to resonate today. Now, while Daniel's expertise in architecture is undeniable, I should also mention that his intellectual range is really wide. While many know him for his insights into urban design, architecture, heritage conservation, I recently, a few days ago, saw him engaged in a passionate debate with a friend about the philosophical ideas of Kant and Spinoza. I'm still not sure who won the debate, right? But I was impressed that he could jump from discussing public plazas in Mexico City to the nature of reason and ethics in a matter of minutes. I also came to the conclusion that if Daniel doesn't make it as an architect, he might make it as a philosopher. As Daniel completes his work as a visiting scholar this year, you probably know Daniel came originally invited by the Lozano Long Institute for Latin American Studies as a Tinker visiting professor, and now is with the School of Architecture as a visiting professor. It's worth noting that this is just one of the many lectures he has given at UT Austin. I think by now it's 5 or 6 that he has given. He's speaking to different audiences and engaging in meaningful discussions across disciplines. This is a testament of the versatility of his scholarship and the impact he has had on our academic community. We are grateful for his contributions to UT School of Architecture and UT Austin at large. And I know we will all take away valuable insights from today's talk. So with that, please join me in welcoming Daniel Escotto.
Well, thank you, Benjamin. Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. We are friends, and that's why he's talking that way. I have a privilege to be here, and thanks for all of you. I know it's a difficult day, Friday before break, so thanks for your interest in this presentation. I will just do something very short as introduction. I think this is a moment I've been dedicated, as Benjamin said, and maybe you saw the other lecture some weeks ago about my professional practice. That I have a combination between the professional practice on public space and urban design, and this is a part that I have. It's about history and theory of architecture. That it's my postgraduate studies in the Barcelona school in the late 90s and early 2000s. But I think this been a moment for researching something that this is a brief part of that researching. I'm going to do it very light and very visual. I know we are. I know that you can connect what I will say, and then I hope to have some time to talk and to discuss some of the ideas. But because what I'm about to talk is something that is happening and happens in every culture, in every architectural thinking, in every moment. And this moment of themes of immigration is something very important. That's what I call the journey of a seed. It's more than goes to the origins. There are many origins for anything. There are many truths for all the historiographical roots of architecture. In Mexico, as you may know, we have this nationality, this pride, this condition of we are from the very ground, from the day zero, and we have everything about culture. So what I like, and I'm very pleased to be here in Austin, in the UT, talking about Mexico, because sometimes in Mexico it's so difficult to say this kind of things. I have troubles. I have been in messing in troubles about saying something that came from outside. And I'm pretty sure that happens many times in many places, in many moments. So I'm not going to take out anything about Luis Barragan. In fact, I'm a great believer. Anytime I've been in his studio, I'm touched and I don't know, it's something magical that happens there. And that's why I was interested to study where it came from, that condition. It was not because of the touching of the hand of God. So that's why I call it desmythification of that origins and that architecture that you may see, and I'm pretty sure you have it in your mind, the images of Luis Barragan, Pritzker Pride, you know it, and that pride that we have. So I'm trying to take this research to the uncomfortable place of the researching seeking for the origins. So as Manfredo Tafuri, the great thinker of architecture, said, it's necessary above all to review all modern history, to find the cracks, to find the interstices, the fractures and the solidity of start again from there, without turning either this history or these divisions into a myth. And taking these myths also down to explain that we are human beings and we all can do the same thing that Luis Barragan could achieve. I'm good. This is images I'm pretty sure you when you think about Mexican modern architecture, that's the idea: colors, the shapes, that force in the landscape, the nature in between, but very strong, like I said, with this kind of filtering everything to do something baroque, at the end because of the colors, because of the powerful of the thing, but at the end, very modern, very, very conceptual modern. So this is Luis Barragan, as you know. But the first projects of Luis Barragan, they look like this one in Guadalajara. Right? So there are housings, many houses. He was looking for something. He was always, all his life was to be seeking for something different. So he was touched in one moment by one book that got to his hands, the Jardin Enchanté, the Ferdinand Bach, that it's a beautiful book. There's an image in the right about the book. And by the early 20s, he got that book and he was impressed, and he traveled to Europe, to the south of, to southern Spain, to the Alhambra, to the many places to be connected with the gardens, with the fountains, with water, with open public space. In fact, there's where I also take some of my ideas for my professional practice also. But I want to start in a very precisely moment of the Mexican architecture, that is El Pedregal de San Ángel. As you may know, Mexico City is a city that was founded over a lake, over water. We gained terrain to the water, but in the southern parts of the Mexico City, there's a rocky land. And I'm going to start with some notes that I have for today's presentation. In the gardens of the Pedregal, a landscape invention, natural or artificial, indigenous or colonized, the Pedregal de San Ángel presents this dichotomy. 70 years after its conception, this subdivision remains in the nostalgic memory of the modern Mexico that failed to answer those questions. Its history dates back to around the 3rd century AD, when the eruption of the small volcano called Xitle covered much of the southern area of Mexico City with lava. This eruption led to the displacement of one of the oldest pre-Hispanic American cultures, of which can still observe remains today, such as the circular pyramid of Cuicuilco. Additionally, a peculiar and defining landscape was formed, an exotic terrain that captured many artists, including Diego Rivera, with its unique vegetation, unique lichens, ferns, mosses, palobobos, colorines, and pirues. Was this young Luis Barragan walking in those sides of El Pedregal with the great master, Dr. Atl, the great painter that also painted landscapes. All these images that I love are the archives at UNAM about the Pedregal. In fact, the campus of the University City campus of UNAM, it's in this same place, in the Pedregal de San Ángel. So look about this rocky land and this landscape and this, it's a very touchy and very sensitive places. This photographer, Armando Salas Portugal, is one of the most great photographers for landscape and architecture. In fact, Luis Barragan chose him to photograph all his works. You know, all these kind of, the volcanoes in the back, the different vegetation, and this landscape where no culture could settle there because of this, they call it the bad country, el mal país, because of the rocky ground, you know. So this is the idea that Luis Barragan in 1945 tried to make inhabitating. In fact, there is an inhospitable terrain of El Pedregal, and followed by the ideas proposed by Diego Rivera in a text titled Requirements for the Organization of El Pedregal. Barragan, along with his business partner, Luis Bustamante. Let's say something also. Luis Barragan, in his first years as an engineer and architect, he was a developer, in fact. I cannot say a speculator or something like that, but he always wanted to make business of all the projects that he used to do. He didn't make money, a lot of money at the end of his life, but he planned the subdivision of that Pedregal as a park, ensuring that the lots were delimited with walls, walls made by rocks, like the patios, like making a lot of inner patios. And public gardens. This is highly surprising, given Barragan's well-known fascination for the gardens and courtyards, as we know him. But died that 1940s, late second, mid of the 40s. This was the brochure to sell the lots in El Pedregal. But at that time, there was only kiosks and pavilions and a kind of architecture that could be, obviously, could be everywhere in the world. It's modern architecture, as Le Corbusier's prompts. There's something very unique there. There are the gardens. So there was no new architecture for the place, but there was a kind of a new gardens, the showcasing of the exhibition gardens, as he called them. But between 1945 and 1949, no buildings were constructed with the subdivisions beyond model gardens, plazas, sales kiosks. However, by 1947, initial sketches were being made for what the architecture of this place could become. These were the preparatory drawings for Prieto Lopez's house, a very well-known house by Barragan. But this architectural approach to El Pedregal was the work of Machetto, this German architect that arrived to Mexico in 1939. So he's a new guy in town, new architect in town. Machetto, born in 1903, in February 20th. He was a very young one comparing to the old group of modern architects. I'm appealing to the idea of Walter Gropius, all the Germans like Mies van der Rohe. He was young for that generation. He was the younger, but he was in the group in many of the places. He decided to go. He's from Koblenz, and he decided to go to Berlin to study with Hans Pelzig. Hans Pelzig is one, as you know, one of the great masters of the Expressionism and a great workforce for pushing new architecture to the modernity. He's like the pre-modern architect. All the force with the tectonic expressionism as architecture should be, changed the way of life of Machetto. Machetto also attended classes with the renowned art historian Heinrich Belflin in Munich. So Machetto was involved in all this ambient of that. You know, those are images of the moment, of the 1920s in Germany. Remember this. For Machetto is always saying in their interviews about this kind of project, like the March Dead Monument of Walter Gropius, the way they draw and then the way they construct the ideas, the relation and this connection with the romantic painters of the 19th century. This romanticism, the German romanticism, was a very great element to inspire Machetto, and he will say it at the end of his life, obviously. And that's why we are going to do that relations with the modern Mexican architecture. So, as you may know, all the Expressionism couldn't be built as architecture itself, but it lived in films, in theatrical exhibitions, many things. So this Expressionism makes Machetto. This is a very related. This is the Dr. Caligari cabinet, and a drawing from Machetto in the Frankfurt Museum of Architecture. Look the relations of always this Expressionism in 1924. Then he turned a little bit. He made a turn to the more technical and functional architecture being and playing a big role in Ernst May team in Frankfurt. Remember that Ernst May made a big team of architects to reconstruct Germany in between war periods. And Macchetto was in charge, a very young one, but was in charge of many of these tectonic, technical, and very functional buildings. In fact, he was part of the Margaret Schürrle-Hotzky Frankfurt Kirche project, and at the end, Macchetto, he was always connected with this Caspar David Friedrich paintings about the relation with the landscape, with the horizon, with all this work force that could be ideas for the new architecture. Then he had to go went out in the same package with Gropius, Marcel Breuer, and all the Germans that were against the Nazis' way of thinking and cultural precedents. They had to go out. He went to England and then to the East Coast, to the U.S. And he was always talking about something that touches him very much. That is the game pavilion in Bristol. It's a very small, brief work that Marcel Breuer did in the 30s in England, in the same path that he has as Gropius through the Britain for some years. And look at this pavilion, the way it is built, the rock of the Bristol, these greenish walls of rock. It's a farming pavilion, in fact. It is not a housing or dwelling element of, it's an exploration about neo-regionalism. And as you know, all the work of Marcel Breuer in the East Coast in the 1937 through 1938-9 was also very important for Macchetto and all this working. At the end, Macchetto arrives to the U.S. With his friend Walter Gropius in his house in Lincoln, Massachusetts. And I do a comparison at the end of the presentation with this housing. Macchetto also get the influence of Frank Lloyd Wright, because many of the many Europeans in the 20s, in 1920s, they got the Basmuth portfolio. So in fact, in Macchetto's archives, we can find a copy of the Basmuth portfolio. So he went, recommended by his masters, his professor from Germany, and Frank Lloyd Wright said to him, "I don't have work for you here. You may have, you can go down to California with a friend of mine." Obviously, he passes through the Kaufman House, and he understood all this regionalism and interiorized everything that happens. And he went down with Richard Neutra and Rudolf Schindler's studio. At the end, he worked for some months in San Francisco with this, doing supervisions for this housing, not really projecting, not really designing, but just helping Richard Neutra. Richard Neutra is an Austrian architect. Obviously, he spoke German, and that's the first ideas of in Macchetto to go down to Mexico, because Richard Neutra was very well published in all Mexican magazines. In fact, we know nowadays that Richard Neutra make the relation with Luis Barragan and have a very good big trip all around the U.S. and Richard Neutra in Mexico. So it's always very important to say that, to remember that during this second half of the 30s, Mexico was perceived as a place where a new world is being formed. Everyone is in war, everyone is fighting. Mexico was the place for peace, the place for gathering, the place for taking everything, everyone there. And there's a publication, a book, a part of the magazine Architectural Record, edited by Esther Bourne, The New Architecture in Mexico. So this is also another movement that touches Marchetto to going down. At the end, by 1939, he already could contact Luis Barragan, and they started together working in project, a very functional, very modern, very international style architecture. This is an atelier for 4 artists in a runabout, in a glorieta. Melchor Ocampo is a very known place in Mexico City. You can see it there, like this Bauhausian architecture that Luis Barragan wasn't thinking about the future architecture. He was looking, he was in process of understanding. But it's truly that Marchetto, with collaboration with Barragan, he always tried to understand this expressionism, this rock that settled to the ground, you know, all the tectonic force of the architecture. And their first commitments and assignments were to build small housings in Mexico City. This is one of the first sketches for the Pedregal de San Angel Prieto Lopez house. In fact, we Mexicans, we have a controversy about why our most influential architect, Luis Barragan, his archives are in Switzerland. There's a story, a very sad story behind that. But this first sketch for the first house that the world knows as Luis Barragan style, it was made by Marchetto in 1947. And this is the one, and you can do the relation with all this tectonic culture of the expressionism of the group of the German in the 20s, the Neue Sachlichkeit group, and they're looking for a new architecture in El Pedregal. Look how he's drawing the rocky land, the rocky ground already in his sketches. Of the relation with it, it's normal that a German architect, with all this formation, with all this background, could present an architecture. In fact, the first architecture in El Pedregal is his own house, Marchetto's house, in 1949, in a very small lot. It's very expressionist, but modern, but a mixture between modernity and the usage of the rock, exactly as the Game Pavilion in Bristol. You know, so all the lessons are presented there by Marchetto. Luis Barragan was only doing gardens by that time, and saw the work of Marchetto in El Pedregal, and he asked 2 houses to showcase housing for selling. And those are the one housing. The first one is in the number 140 of Avenida de las Fuentes in El Pedregal. Look how all the elements, as I told you, I'm going to talk and present only visuals just to do the relation. You can see the stairs and the connection with the volcanic ground. This is the big image of that. For me, very strong, very Mexican, but at the end talking about the land. And later on, you can see that kind of staircases all Barragan's places. You know, this is the other house in the 130, in the number 130 of the same avenue. Um, and as you can see, here is presenting what at the end Luis Barragan could present later on, improving, doing some changes. There were, they split, in fact. They were collaborating since maybe 1939 to 1949. They split their ways, and Luis Barragan started something very important, and Machetto founded at a workshop in the UNAM. In fact, Benjamin and I study in the Machetto workshop. It's an atelier inside the School of Architecture in Mexico City, in the UNAM. Well, at the end, El Pedregal used to be the place for the big housing, for the artists, for the, you know, the mainstream culture of the moment in Mexico. Luis Barragan started, something sparked in his inspiration, and he started to do that turn to the elements that we now all know about his architecture. This is Prieto Lopez house, images of Prieto Lopez house as you may know it. You can visit nowadays the place, and you can find all the elements that were settled and presented previously by Machetto. Well, those are images that you may know. That's why I'm talking about all these places. This is his studio terrace, maybe one of the places we cannot publish, and we have not the copyrights of the images of Luis Barragan. We can be in trouble about that. But I want to read something about that. The game pavilion can be considered the precursor of the modern single-family home model that Breuer and Gropius later developed. Houses that adopted all the location and its culture, such as the series of homes built along the East Coast in the United States, with Gropius, Lincoln's house, being one of them. The use of the stones that anchors the building to the ground, the common architectural strategies among Germans who saw the tectonics as the way to root architecture to its side, the large glass panels also featured in the model houses in Avenida de las Fuentes, which were not typical of right architecture, for example, wood as traditional North American buildings, materials for enclosures, and steel as superstructure, symbolizing technological and in advancement of modernity, use pergolas and windows frames. I want to say, as an epilogue of this presentation, the relation with Walter Gropius and Machetto. This is a meeting between them in Chetto's house in the late 60s. And I saw this visual relation between this neo-regionalism that we can do it, we can really appreciate in both manifestos. I can say the manifestos of each one as a personal manifestos when a new person arrives and settled in a new culture. So how is the way an architect could sell what he is in the real condition? It's building his own house. His own house is the real manifesto for that. Machetto understood that in the years, in the months when he passed with Gropius. The Chetto house nowadays, as Gropius house in Lincoln, can be visited. And the second moment is another relation about this house with Juan O'Gorman. Now Juan O'Gorman It's one of the figures that has been pop up in the Mexican architecture, the same as Frida Kahlo, and I always saying is the new Frida Kahlo in architecture. Max and Juan, they always were friends. In fact, Juan O'Gorman, when Max Cheto arrived to Mexico as an immigrant, couldn't be responsible for his project. Juan O'Gorman signed all the projects. As you may know, when someone needs to be certified and to have all the licenses to do architecture. I'm pretty sure it's not written, nobody talks about that. Max Cheto was a very, not shy, but very introverted person. And Juan O'Gorman changed, as you may know also, his life from the profound, functional, constructivist architecture to a very neo-regionalist architecture. In fact, at his home, the cave, we call it the cave, now it's almost demolished. They were playing chess there, as many times. And when I was researching about Max Cheto, the gardener of the house, I'm going to go back some, the garden of Max Cheto house is something very amazing. So I was asking and looking for information in 20 years before, and someone told me you had to go to interview the gardener, Max Cheto's gardener, and actually it's a Oaxacan people, a guy from Oaxaca, Mexico, that used to be in charge of the garden, and he told me about all the afternoons that they used to have in the terraces or in both houses, playing chess and trying to see something different in the modern architecture. This is the second level, the second stage of the Max Cheto's house is his studio, in fact. With the ceiling, as you can see, the ceiling is all these rocks, colored rocks, small rocks that there are glued with the concrete of the roof. It is this is the sketch. This is a sketch made or seen from above. The constructed one is this one. You can see the rocks there, the Tzontli rocks. There, it's cosmogonic horoscope of the family. You've seen very well, but it's 1949, and Juan O'Gorman was planning the library, the big building that maybe is the showcase, maybe it's the most published image of the modern Mexican architecture in whole books of history. And it's exactly the same technique that was thought in those cafes and talkings in the terraces of their homes. So what I want to point out here is the collaboration, the relation, how a German, an immigrant, with all the idea, with all this background, with different relation, because at the end, Max Cheto and Luis Barragan couldn't see each other. They were in fight all time. Juan O'Gorman could settle a good friendship with him. And to finish, and to have time for talking, I can say that many more parallels could be drawn and rather than mere coincidences. They seem to be partial responses to a long-standing questions about the possible genealogy of the architecture that Barragan popularized in the 1950s, now labeled as a modern Mexican architecture. Can reflection on architecture in Mexico and its landscape emerge from a mind of an immigrant architect? The truth is that Machete was trained in the breeding ground, what we call it, of the German more broadly, Central European modernism. He attended Siam conferences. Machete was with everyone in person. He was friend of Gropius. He had communication with Le Corbusier. In fact, Siegfried Gideon said wrote in the Frankfurt Zeitung once that there was about the Major League building in Geneva in 1927, that the best project is from Le Corbusier, obviously, but the second best one is from a young German architect named Machete. He attended the Siam conference and experienced the work of modern architects firsthand, not just through black and white magazines pages. He exchanged ideas and reviewed projects in the interwar Europe that saw a new order before the Nazi regime took hold. Perhaps the real question is, can ideas travel, spread, and quietly take roots to exert an influence? Critical historiography judges and condemns. I'm here, sorry. This is because spring, so we're in spring, and this is jacaranda in blooming. Can ideas travel, spread, and quietly take roots to exert an influence? Critical historiography judges and condemns, and today truths are partial. Only historical truths has the power to refine what is known as never before heard. This is from my great professor in Barcelona, Jose Maria Rovira, and said, looking back at the past is not just about inspecting or to find a pattern that is the same for everyone. We look back and the object transforms, all according to the nature of the observer. That's why history is changing every time. One cannot touch history without changing it. And that's it. Thank you very much for hearing.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for this inspiring presentation. So we have